Okay, welcome everybody to today's webinar, Wisconsin's Clean Energy Transition. What does this mean for my small business? Today's webinar is being recorded and a version of it will be posted to the CUB YouTube page for public viewing after the fact. I also want to acknowledge today's webinar support from CUB's Marketing Coordinator, Evolution Marketing. Lisa Giesenbauer will collect your questions for Q&A at the end. And if you have technical questions or questions that you may not want to share with everyone here, please send them directly to Lisa and include Lisa Giesenbauer and include your contact info. She'll make sure either a CUB staff or one of our speakers will follow up with an answer to your question. We have, let's see, so my name is Tom Content. And I'm the Executive Director at the Citizens Utility Board of Wisconsin. I'm here because consumer protection is critical with utility service. The money that you pay to your utility should be affordable for you and your family, spent responsibly by the utility, and result in reliable service. CUB represents all of us in Wisconsin and advocates for all of these things as well as fairness. If you're not a member and think this is important too, please consider supporting our work and becoming a member today. CUB has some facts about CUB. We are the consumer advocate for Wisconsin's residential and small business customers. We're the nation's oldest CUB. There are eight or so around the country now, founded over 40 years ago. Created by the legislature, we are nonpartisan, we are nonprofit, and we advocate for consumer protection and affordable and reliable utility service, as I said. Our main area of focus is on regulatory work in the cases at the Public Service Commission, but we also work hard on education and outreach, and this webinar series during Energy Awareness Month is part of that. I want to take a moment to thank our promotional partners for this webinar and our series of webinars during Energy Awareness Month, including Be Local Wisconsin, Focus on Energy, Midwest Renewable Energy Association, Renew Wisconsin, Vernon County Energy District, Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum, Wisconsin Eco Latinos, the Wisconsin Energy Institute at UW-Madison, and the Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council. I want to welcome our panelists. Today we're delighted to have Maria Redmond here, Director of Wisconsin's Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy, Scott Coenen, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum, and Becky Cooper, owner of Bounce Milwaukee. Our first speaker will unpack the role that businesses can play in Wisconsin's transition to a clean energy future. Maria?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. You want to jump to the next slide? We'll get right into it. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy, the office was created in 2019 via Executive Order 38. And really, we spend a lot of our time focusing on programs and policies related to the clean energy transition and how we can support our businesses and local governments and how we can get our agencies positioned to help support the clean energy transition and clean energy economy here in the state. So we work very closely with a lot of stakeholders in order to make this work happen. Next slide. So I feel it's really important to highlight the impact that small businesses have in the state of Wisconsin. And small businesses make up 99.4% of Wisconsin businesses here in the state. That's huge. And over 49% of Wisconsin employees. And as you can see by this map, you can see that the concentration of these businesses are found in rural areas of Wisconsin. Wisconsin has about 85% of our state is rural. And you'll see that a lot of the small businesses are also in northern Wisconsin. So it's important to understand the makeup of where our businesses are and what they represent. Also, just as a fact that small businesses make up 69% of the clean energy sector in 2020, and 12% of clean energy workers were veterans. And so just keeping in mind that small business has a huge role to play in the clean energy transition, especially making up a large majority of our businesses here in Wisconsin. Next slide. And And as far as industries go, small business count by size and industry is really important to look at as well. All small businesses, like I'd mentioned, there's 461,000. Oh, previous slide. That's okay. And you see that it covers a lot of industries. But one of the things too that is interwoven through all of these industries is they all use energy in some way, shape, or form. Even if you are running a business out of your home, that space is using energy. And so it's really important to think about our energy use and how we can transition to be more efficient with our energy use and also transition to clean energy. Next slide. So that puts in perspective how we use energy here in the state. So what we have here is a chart that shows our estimates of energy consumption in Wisconsin. And you see it's primarily fossil fuels, natural gas, which is going to be used in home heating and cooling, motor gasoline, which excludes the biofuels, would be used in our transportation, and then coal, primarily used for the generation of electricity for our homes and businesses. So having that heavy reliance on fossil fuel and it has an impact on not only what we're spending on our energy needs, because we're not fossil fuel, we don't have fossil fuel production here in the state. And so therefore, the amount of money that we spend on energy, which is around $21 billion a year, a majority of that actually leaves the state because we have to spend the money out of state to get our energy here. So we actually export about $14 billion to $15 billion out of state for our energy needs. And so any opportunity that we have here to keep the money here, keep that money circulating in this economy is very, very important. And that is why we're doing the work that we're doing to transition to a clean energy economy. Next slide. So one of the things that I've been working on in our office, along with the agencies and a lot of stakeholders throughout the state, is the development of a clean energy plan. We were one of 8 states in the country that did not have one. And in April of this year, the governor released the Clean Energy Plan with the value statement of justice, equity, and collective action. Justice, ensuring that those communities who have been impacted by and not historically engaged in our energy decision-making processes, that they have an opportunity to do so. Equity, that there's a lot of opportunity for equity in the energy transition, making sure that everybody reaps the benefits of not only the health benefits, but the economic benefits of generating our energy here in the state, or reducing our energy use and keeping those dollars circulating in our economy. And collective action, that it's going to take all of us, businesses, local government, state government, federal government, to make this transition happen. And so as we were moving through the process for the Clean Energy Plan, 4 pathways emerged right away: that we want to accelerate clean energy technology deployment, we want to maximize energy efficiency, reduce that demand for energy in the state, modernize our buildings and industry, and innovate in transportation. And so it's a multi-sector, multi-resource approach to transition to clean energy, while prioritizing health equity, environmental justice, and equitable economic development, and thinking about how we can fast track workforce just transition, and thinking about how our local governments, state governments, and tribal nations can also lead by example. Next slide. So we do have specific strategies. There are 70 strategies in the Clean Energy Plan that cover a number of sectors, but really we want to ensure businesses, communities are in the state of Wisconsin are well positioned to share in this work and take advantage of the large influx of federal dollars that will be coming through the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, to be able to take advantage of that funding and position ourselves for the opportunities there, but also making sure that we play a lead, that businesses play a lead role. The slide I showed before showed the number of businesses and small businesses here in the state, and every action counts. Everything that you do as a small business counts towards this transition. Next slide. So just a few highlights of some of the strategies specifically for businesses that we're working on implementing is really understanding workforce needs, as we understand that for every person looking for a job here in the state, that there are 8 jobs available to that person. And so getting people employed, but also looking at the opportunities to get folks into clean energy and energy related positions to help businesses transition and reduce their energy consumption, but also making sure that we're supporting innovation and providing incentives. I know Becky is going to talk a bit about Focus on Energy and how Focus on Energy helped, but also expanding that program to support this transition and creating new grant and loan programs that help businesses with audits, with buying technology, bringing down the costs, and just ensuring that we are supporting the overall transition. Next slide. I think that's the end of my slides. And thank you. And I'll be answering questions a little bit later.
Super. Thanks, Maria. And so I just wanted to give quickly some CUB perspective on some steps toward a cleaner energy transition. Maria mentioned Focus on Energy, and I think that's one of the things that between the Focus on Energy and the incentives that it has, and then the Inflation Reduction Act and the rebates and the incentives that are coming, I think it's paramount that that businesses stay on top of what's available through the Inflation Reduction Act. As it comes out right now, we know what the tax credits are, but all the initiatives that are coming through the IRA are still TBD on exactly how those are going to flow through the state of Wisconsin. Our hope is that the Focus on Energy can end up being a program that works so well for Wisconsin and Wisconsin businesses in terms of rebates, incentives already can be the conduit so we have kind of one-stop shopping for for all the savings opportunities to come. My slides aren't, there we go. So I mentioned that on the right of these 4 steps, but other things that can be done, we can make it, just going from right to left, make it easier for customers to access Focus on Energy. So that's that one-stop shopping, and also have policies that enable business owners, residents, but in this case, business owners to really take control of their own energy costs, whether it's through innovative rates, through energy efficiency programs, through the ability to lease your solar panels instead of having to pay up front to buy your solar panels. Those are all policies that could help. To the left of that, saving on the coal plants. One of the key planks in our platform for a more affordable clean energy transition is that utilities shouldn't be profiting from coal plants long after they shut down and aren't needed to keep the lights on. So that's something that we have legislation already on the books in this state that allows us to refinance a portion of those coal plants. We hope that the legislature can go even further, and so we can actually secure even more savings through lower costs for customers. And then on planning the utility system of the future. The utility system is changing rapidly, but we think that the state PSC has an important role that it could play. Right, it's not being given the tools to play that role, where it could give a more in-depth evaluation on the exact portfolio of new projects that each utility has coming up in the years ahead. And circling back just to the bottom line on savings for businesses, I think given the energy cost pressures that we've talked about in our earlier webinar this year, and that are still facing us with natural gas prices up so significantly in the market, the ROI, the return on investment from making changes to your business and to tackle your energy footprint, if you will, your energy use, is even better today than it was 2 years ago when natural gas prices were very low. So I think that's something that every business should be alert to. And with that, that's Cub's take. And I want to move on and allow our next speaker to talk about a small business case study. So I want to introduce Becky from Bounce, Milwaukee. Becky Cooper.
Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you, Lisa, and everyone who worked to put this together today. So Bounce Milwaukee in general, we are a family entertainment center located in the Bayview neighborhood in Milwaukee. We can go to the next slide. We opened in 2014. You can see a lovely picture of me, heavily pregnant there. Opened in 2014, and we had a really strong focus on sustainability and community, but we also had a very limited budget. So we couldn't do everything that we wanted to on day one. And that, as we were planning, became really overwhelming and paralyzing. So we decided to take a dual approach here. The first step was anything is better than nothing, which is really a great technique for any paralyzing existential crisis. I highly recommend it. But it just gets you moving so that you can start taking action, and then you can get to the point where you're planning your next steps, which hopefully alleviates future paralyzing decisions. So the next step was going and saying, making those plans, how do we best prepare for when we can afford to tackle all these sustainability goals if we can't solve all of climate change on day one? So next slide. So we started with some very obvious things, low flow toilets, locally sourced ingredients, automated controls to turn on our inflatable blowers and our arcade games and things like that. And then bigger decisions. Our entire mezzanine on our building, we have a 6,000 square foot mezzanine that was designed, engineered, and manufactured just down the road in New Berlin. Our pizza ovens are designed and built in Menominee Falls. And speaking of those pizza ovens, we opted for electric ovens that required no natural gas. And they also have catalytic converters built in, so they have no emissions. And we didn't need to install a hood or a vent system. So not only are we reducing those harmful pollutants that we would be putting out, but we also saved about $12,000 by skipping out on putting in a huge hood system. However, not all of our decisions were that easy because of the limitations on our space and our staffing. We opted for disposable dishes, but in that decision, we went with the least harmful option, which was the backyard compostable dishes. So we had all that in place in 2014 when we first opened. And as we got our footing, we started to plan for what we could do down the road. We built right into our lease an expansion option so that if either of the businesses on either side of us left, we would have right of first refusal so that we could expand in place rather than trying to pack up our entire building and rebuilding somewhere else. We monitored our energy usage in so many ways to try to be more efficient. And that led to really minor changes that added up pretty quickly. So like replacing 2 1-horsepower blowers on an inflatable with 1 2-horsepower inflatable or blower. It sounds like it should be about the same thing, but there is an energy savings there. And those little things add up really quickly. We started to research solar installation and got those quotes well in advance so that we knew what our goal was. We could set money aside for future expansion. And then we put in the time to research grants and partnerships. And I want to say a huge thank you to Maria, because looking for those focus on energy grants and tax credits and things like that is so much easier since 2019. And I'm really grateful to have that information more easily accessible. And then we developed our green team so that they could spot things in day-to-day operations that we might be missing from a higher level view. So things like leaving our laser tag system off during school days when most of our guests are toddlers and not going to use laser tag. Again, small change that adds up really quickly. We changed our parchment paper usage. All these things that our staff could see because they were hands-on day to day made those changes over time. We can go to the next slide. So in 2017, we got to exercise that right of first refusal and took the unit next to us. We were able to expand out and capitalize on all that planning we had been doing for the last 3 years. So we'll talk more specifically about solar panels later, but they were really our top priority, just below like making the building mildly presentable. So we put that really high on the list. Then we applied to become a Tesla destination charger, which meant that Tesla not only installed 2 Tesla chargers, but also a J-plug charger to make it accessible for all EVs. So we didn't have to invest anything there. We put those in, it becomes an attraction for guests. And it also allowed us to charge our own electric vehicle. We got our beautiful Nissan Leaf, and paired with our solar panels and our pizza ovens, that made us fully solar powered pizza from start to finish. And then we switched from a 4-compartment hand washing sink to a super high efficiency dishwasher and using reusable real dishes. And the upfront costs for all those were a bit intimidating, to be fair, but we could sit down and see what our short-term solutions were costing us, and then reevaluate what we were spending month to month and how those changes would play out in the future. We can go to the next slide so that I can get really geeky about doing the dishes. A 4-compartment sink, speaking of those upfront expenses, is about $1,200 for a pretty nice one. A high efficiency commercial dishwasher starts at about $6,000. So obviously we have a big difference there. However, 4-compartment sink uses about 60 gallons of water in those 4 basins, and you have to change out the water pretty frequently. So we estimate about 12 gallons per load, whereas our dishwasher uses about 3/4 of a gallon per load. And then it saves the water from the rinse cycle to maintain the heat in the cabin, and then pre-rinse the next load. So we're maximizing that water usage, minimizing the water usage by maximizing how it's used. And then we talked about that moral dilemma of using disposables and when we made the least bad choice. But compostable dishes are really, really expensive as well. We spent a minimum of $150 per month just on plates. And when we switched to ceramic plates, I bought $450 worth of plates in 2017, and 5 years later, we still have a few cases of those that we haven't even opened. And of course, with reusable plates and cups and silverware, we are washing more loads of dishes than we were previously. But with the large capacity washer, it's not even twice as many. So even with increased dish volume, our water consumption is down about 35% from 2016. And then our gas consumption is down because of that water heating efficiency. We use far fewer chemicals. We have cut our waste, our trash disposal in half, which also meant that we could cut how many pickups we have in half and save a lot of money on waste bills. And then the biggest saving, of course, is staff time. I don't have to have someone change to sink for many hours a day. A load of dishes takes about 2 minutes from start to finish. So I have those staff members who can be out doing other things, covering other zones, and it saves me a ton of money there. We can go to the next slide. Our solar panels. I have a bunch of the data there about what the system itself, the setup is. Our solar panel system cost about $82,000, but with those Focus on Energy grants and the tax credits, that covered about half of the cost for the materials and the installation. The other half was part of our SBA loan for the expansion. Without Focus on Energy and the federal tax credits, I honestly don't know if we would have been able to do this, no matter how highly we prioritized it. So it's just an example of how powerful the support is there. I mentioned those inflatable blowers, and they are not cheap to run. So we have 3 gas and electric meters, and we generally have one really large bill, one smaller one, and then a credit from our solar panel meter that offsets some of the cost from the others, in addition to paying for itself entirely. So if we combine the usage from all 3 meters, our energy bills would be about $1,500 per month higher without the solar panels. And then I also mentioned that we charge our electric vehicle from the solar panels, offsetting the cost of gas right now, especially when it was $5 or $6 per gallon over the summer, has saved us literally thousands of dollars over the last several years, in addition to reducing emissions and, of course, having that super cool slogan of solar powered pizza. We can go to the 7th slide. And then sustainability isn't just what happens with the materials inside our walls and on our roof. There's a huge aspect of this that's about education and behavior and buy-in. So we voluntarily unionized our workforce and we raised our wages. Turnover in the entertainment industry and the hospitality industry is about 75 to 80%. Ours is below 10%. And how is that factored into sustainability? Buy-in from employees means that they are actively looking for ways to make things run better and make their jobs easier and make the business successful long term. The good that our company does reflects on them, and that institutional knowledge cuts down on wastefulness as well. I'm not constantly having to retrain or re-explain why we do things the way we do. That information is held within our company and then passed on to newer team members as well. And I always tell our staff, I would rather pay them than We Energies, and they are primed to come up with great ideas for sustainability and efficiency. And then we also have our hyper loyal customers. We gain so many new customers from people coming to charge their cars. We have people call and ask about our solar panels. They see our vehicle out doing pizza deliveries, and they ask about electric vehicles. And it's great to have those conversations, and it creates that ripple effect in the community that I think is the most important part of sustainability work, which is making it very visible and making it approachable for people. So we are always happy to have those conversations and share our experience so that other people can grow from that as well and see how doable it is. So thank you very much. And I'll be happy to answer questions as well.
Super. Thanks so much, Becky. That's quite a story, quite a sustainability journey you walked us through there. So thank you. And now we'll move to our Q&A, and I'm going to turn things over to Scott Coenen from WCEF to lead our Q&A session. Scott?
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. I'm excited to get into this a little bit because we have a wide breadth of knowledge here. Becky has done this on the ground, actually. It's a really exciting story. It's very cool. I love bouncing. So I'm very interested to get into that a little bit more. And we've got Tom here from a system statewide perspective, Maria as well, really working from the administrative and state side of things. So let's dive in on things. And I'd love this to be a conversation. So Becky, Maria, Tom, if you guys, feel if I'm asking a question in one direction, you think you have a really good, answer for it too, feel free to chime in on that. And obviously anybody from the crowd, please, feel free to get your questions into us with the chat there as well. So let's dive right in on it. I guess my first question will go to you, Maria. It seems to me, and Becky, you can probably tell us this firsthand, right? The problem for small business owners of the small business industry is always capacity, right? Like there's only so many hours in a day, right? And if my day is spent on the phone trying to figure out something with focus on energy, it's not spent on the phone with customers or with my actual business, right? So I guess, Maria, my question to you, first off, anybody that's listening to this from the small business side, what's step one? Like, what is step number one? I am interested in this. I tuned into a Cub webinar on it. I took that
Yeah.
time. What's step one? Tell me.
Well, step one is asking for help. I think it's there are a number of organizations out there that are at the ready to help. Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council, Focus on Energy. If you're thinking about transitioning to an alternative fuel, then we talked about Bounce Milwaukee talked about electric vehicles, but there's other types of alternative fuels out there, biofuels, other fuels. Wisconsin Clean Cities is a really great resource. They do fleet audits, and they'll help with some of the analysis around different types of fuels. Our office, the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy, we are connected with all of the agencies here in the state. So, the Public Service Commission, the Department of Natural Resources, we want to serve as a central point for helping people to take that first step, to be able to ask the questions, and like, you may be starting from scratch, or you may have done a little bit of research yourself and it's really piqued your interest. So we just want to be there as a resource. And there are a lot of organizations out there that are just ready to help. So I think taking that first step to ask for help and get those resources is really important.
I like that. I'll ask the question to you, Becky. Even I liked your mantra a lot of what was it? Anything is better than nothing, right? Like I really love that a lot. I think that's very cool. It's a cool way to kind of look at a lot of different things, not just maybe energy. There's some things in my life I could probably be doing right now. But so Becky,
use it for parenting a lot, to be honest.
yeah, I can buy that, absolutely. So Becky, I'll ask you, where did you start actually? Like, what did you pick up the phone first? Where did you start?
Yeah, I think we had solar panels on our house, back in 2010 or something like that. But when you're looking at it from a business perspective, it's overwhelming. And so it was starting to delve in to this company in California is doing this thing. This company in Massachusetts is checking into that, and doing some outreach to them, emailing business owners who are have already taken those steps, or just saying like, okay, so we're going to be making pizzas. How can we do this a little bit differently than it's been done before? And then just kind of digging down and starting to do the research. I mentioned the resources available from the state are so much more easily accessible now. And it's great to see across the board this information being so much more accessible and easy to not just find, but apply to your own specific situation. So first steps, honestly, is reaching out. I think a great thing about the sustainability community in general is we are really geeky about this stuff, and we love sharing the information. So asking literally anyone who has an interest in this or has taken any steps, they will be able to tell you what they've done and what they would do differently too.
And I think that raises a pretty good point. I like, particularly Becky, I like your story and I like your passion behind it, because I think you kind of share this story as an opportunity, right? Like you obviously have a personal passion for this, but I like that you highlighted from staffing, retention to marketing success to other things. There are obviously a lot of other benefits to this. And I'll ask a broader question, maybe all three of you, Tom, even if you've heard from some small business members. I think often the energy transition or, the introduction of these new technologies or energy efficiency, all that stuff, sometimes it's presented from a doom and gloom perspective, or from this is going to be forced on people, right? Like, this is a thing we gotta do it, right? Like, we have to, we're up against the wall, as opposed to maybe something that's more to my heart, a little bit more optimistic, right? So, Maria, I'll ask you first off, how do we, can we change that narrative maybe a little bit, but also your own conversations, Maria, with business owners across the state as you've been traveling the state? What does that look like? How have those conversations gone?
Yeah, I think we don't want this to be forced, right? But I think what's important is to understand the impact that change has on I throw out the $1 billion number all the time because I think it is really impactful that the even small changes in our behavior, in our businesses and what we're doing, can be cumulative and lead to big impactful changes within the state. And I think people understanding that if you're reducing your energy demand, you're also reducing what you're spending, and you're on that energy that's leaving the state and that's staying in your pocket. And you know what that does? There's a domino effect with that. The more money that you have in your pocket, the more you're going to spend in your community, the more you're going to travel around the state and enjoy our beautiful natural resources. There's this kind of domino effect. And so we don't want it to be this doom and gloom thing. We want it to be, look, there's a lot of benefits to you and to your community by making changes and minor changes. And we want to, I think the other part of it is oftentimes the government is, like the regulatory licensing, like all of these, like we're not here to help. But we, there are pockets of us in the government that really want to help and want to kind of help the businesses make those changes so that we can see those cumulative effects and benefits throughout the state.
Yeah, I can go next. I just wanted to say that when you think about the utility zone transition to cleaner sources, it's not being forced upon them. Wisconsin did have a renewable portfolio standard that mandated a certain percentage of renewables, but the utilities are now voluntarily moving to rapidly exceed that. And it's all about economics. It's all about the falling price of solar over the last 5 to 10 years, especially. And it's just been so dramatic. So, coupled with that, the falling price of battery storage as well. And so that isn't being necessarily forced on them at all, because they're seeing economic opportunity for their own shareholders in investing in solar. And I wanted to pivot back to the small business side of things, because the Inflation Reduction Act is not so on top of that cost drop we're seeing, the tax credits are now being extended. So for a business like Becky's to do it today, it would probably end up costing less to do the equivalent size system than what Bounce had to pay, just because of the tax credits are in place, the costs are continuing to come down. So it's really about an economic driver there.
I think that raises a pretty good point, Tom, from a system perspective too. Marie, I picked one thing out of your presentation in particular from a statewide look. You had mentioned, I think it was 85% of small businesses are located in rural areas of the state, right?
Well, 85% of our state is rural.
I'm sorry, 85% of our state is rural. Okay, right. Which and we're all fairly, everybody I think in this area is pretty well versed on the rural urban divide on a lot of different things, right? So I guess a question to you real quick: does energy use look different in a rural context than it does in an urban context necessarily? So Becky's story is obviously one from Milwaukee. Does that look different if I'm in, if I'm up north, say in Chilton, Wisconsin, or somewhere else? Like, what does that profile look like, rural versus urban?
It could look different. It's because it's a different type of fuel that you're using. Generally, your rural areas are going to be more reliant on propane or heating oil, which is it's an unregulated market, right? And so there'll be different pricing, and so there's different issues in rural areas versus urban areas that are closer to natural gas lines and closer to some of the generation. So when we're talking about businesses needing to understand their energy profile and having some of that analysis done, that's going to be super important as one of those first steps that we were discussing before.
Yeah. So that brings me around to maybe some disadvantages that you all see to this to some degree. And Becky, I'll start with you, if you wouldn't mind. First off, I'm interested in, you mentioned the green team that you assembled with your staff, and I would be very, very interested in what does that look like? Because I think business owners can sometimes, and I think we actually just maybe lost Becky. Well, we'll get back around to the green team then, I guess, at this point, because
there
I'm
she is.
interested. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll ask her. But Maria, I'm interested in getting your thoughts on this too, I guess.
Well, we have a green team too. Do you want to finish your question first, though? I feel like I jumped the gun there.
No, I would love to hear about that too. But I'm interested in like encouraging business owners, both like big, medium, and small, to kind of there's a ground up aspect to this too, right? Like we're kind of approaching it from top down. How can I change my business operations? When I think it's actually a really good lesson that we might need to listen sometimes too to folks on the ground up.
Absolutely. I think Becky has just a great example. I love her example of, the empowering her employees, right? And getting that employee input and kind of syncing up the goals of what you think is a good idea with like the reality and the day-to-day activities of a business. And so I think, we're doing that with our lead by example work here in the state. Is like we keep telling everyone in the state, hey, you need to reduce your energy consumption, and here are all these goals, but you know what? We need to be doing that ourselves here in our state agencies. And so we've formed a green team as well, so that and other agencies are doing the same thing, so that we can really look at the way that we're conducting our business in the state and empowering our employees to have a role in that. So it is the bottom up, and not just us saying, hey, do it, with no justification or no, engagement on that front. Becky's back.
And I think that's really smart, right? Like, business and state, right? State government can run that way as well to some degree, although I think sometimes it rarely does, but I guess that's encouraging. Yeah, that's encouraging to hear. So Becky, the question was before you took a break from us real quick. No worries. Yeah. I'd love to hear just a little bit more about the green team that you do touched on too, because I like the bottom up approach of kind of, I assume, listening to employees and staff on this and their own, on hand experience with what they're looking for.
Yeah. And I apologize for that. I had some really great things that I was going to say and enlighten you all. And then my computer said, no, thanks. So we switched to the phone. But the staff, they're doing the hands-on work every day. They can see what materials we're using. They are, and often with them being younger, they have a different perspective, or have more of a perspective on climate change issues. We mentioned before, sometimes that doom and gloom is difficult to frame your work around, but they're understanding that they need to have some big changes, and they're not set in their ways of doing things the way it's been done for 30 years, just because this is how we do it in business. So they have these great ideas, and we'd sit down and have a conversation about, okay, so we've been printing out the schedule on paper. Why are we doing this on paper? It's 2019. Why are we using the parchment paper that is $80 a box when we have parchment paper that comes with our pizzas? We can cut our pizzas right on that parchment paper. So these really minor things do start to add up, and Green Team ends up not being just about environmental issues, even though in name that's what it's supposed to be for, but looking at efficiencies in how we run the business as well. So how our staff is distributed into different work zones, how cleaning duties are done, all of those kinds of things, so that we can make better decisions for the business as a whole. And that ends up cutting staff time. It ends up improving profitability. And these things really pay off in a very real way.
I like that a lot. It took one question here to switch gears real quick. Tom, I'll send this in your direction, I think, from the crowd. Obviously, there is maybe a little bit of tension here, especially when it comes to solar, energy storage, maybe some of the, we would term at a certain off-grid technologies or energy technologies. Obviously, there's some tension here between independent small businesses and maybe the greater grid utilities, and that's not always the incentives aren't always lined up there. So I'd love to get your thoughts for a second, Tom, on where you see Cub in that situation, and also what we have to do maybe to smooth over some of those limitations that I think are put on businesses that are looking to do what Becky's doing, and that are looking to take a more proactive role.
Exactly. Well, I think one of the keys is that I think businesses want to take control of their energy costs. They want to find ways to save, and solar is an option. But there is a big upfront cost attached to solar. And so there are active cases. There was legislation last year, but there's an active cases right now at the Public Service Commission that Cub is involved with, where solar companies are asking for the ability to lease your solar equipment instead of own your solar equipment, so that those projects can be financed over time instead of upfront. And I think that's what's important from Cub's perspective. We think that that's something that consumers, residential and small business, should have the right to lease that equipment. It's just a different form of payment for the project. And so we are in a active case involving that at the Public Service Commission. And we encourage participation in that case by businesses that are interested in that issue. Those are the so-called third-party solar dockets. That's a key. And then the next step beyond that is maximizing the dollars that are going to be available from the Inflation Reduction Act and other sources for both solar and now batteries. I think one of the game changers for me when I looked at the Inflation Reduction Act is the fact that there's a 10-year 30% tax credit for the batteries. It's something that really we can have utility resilience, but this is about businesses being resilient at the same time.
Yeah, and what I like about that, Tom, is you're talking about using the technology as a hedge against cost pressure, right?
Exactly.
Period, right. Which I think appeals to a lot of people broadly. I guess we've got just a couple of minutes left here. Becky, I'll toss one more question your way. I'd love to just hear just a little bit more about maybe your ownership structure, because not all small businesses are just LLCs. Some are partnerships, right? Some small business owners have to deal with more than just one cook in the kitchen, right? So I guess I'm interested in your experience. Did you receive some pushback, or have you received pushback? Was there some skepticism to some of these steps? Did you have to win some minds over on some of this? What was your experience like that?
Yeah, so we're just my husband and I as the owners. So usually we do all right with making decisions. But we have had those times when we've sat down and said, I don't know how to prioritize what we want to do. And he will generously say, the most frugal man in history. And I am very much a data person. I really like having information. So we were able to go through and look at, the solar panel question and say, this will take this long to pay off. And theoretically, it will do this for our energy efficiency. And for him, that economic side was really important. For me, I was still hesitant. I'll admit that. The sustainability aspect of that was really important to me as well. And then when I could get down and see the data and the numbers, once we got it moving, I was like, all right, you were right. You've got this. We had the opposite conversation on the dishwasher thing. And I was able to go through and get all those numbers, which is why I picked these two examples, because they were just these two core issues for us, which sounds very silly, but it made a huge difference to our operations, and changed our staffing and changed our expenses and all those. when I talk to other small business owners, yes, we get some pushback about, that's great for you, but we couldn't do that because, and I will have frequent conversations about you could do this thing or that thing. And I point them towards the different grant programs and things like that so that they can do their own research and find that information on their own. But it's an uphill battle, and it's trying to find what is that person's touch point. Is it the environmental issue? Is it the profitability? Is it cost savings? Is it independence? So
everything's a process, no matter what, right?
Yes, yeah.
and
There's always convincing to be done. Yeah.
Yes, and some of them are longer than others, right?
Yes.
Longer path to walk. All right. Well, I appreciate it. I want to thank everybody. Maria, if you have one.
Oh, I just had one thing, is that Becky, I am inspired by you because you're a first mover. Because you're willing to take some of those risks. You serve as an example. And what you said in your presentation is that other people ask about it, right? Other people are interested in what you're doing, and you're educating just by doing. And so being a first mover is really inspirational. And we need more businesses like you, and we want to support more businesses in the state to be these first movers and move this along.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And thanks for all you do to make that possible. It's exciting.
I appreciate the time. I would love to, I've got more questions, so we could go on further, but I have been told that there's a tight time frame. And I did see in the chat that one of our attendees, Corey, brought up property assessed clean energy financing as well, PACE financing, which I think everybody should look into. Phenomenal tool, absolutely great financing tool to kind of enable some of these things as well. So I think that's a very well taken point from the audience. We'll turn it over now to just like our last from Maria, Becky, and Tom, kind of our last bullet points, what we want you guys to remember real quick. So we'll turn it over. I think Maria is first off here to start, and we'll dive in on our bullet points real quick.
Yeah. So I don't know if their slides are going to come up, but my thing I wanted to share is that if you have an idea, if you have a lot of questions, you have to start somewhere. And so we're here to help. You're saying, I don't know where to start. I have other priorities. I have to run my business. Like I have to do the core job. I'm scared. What if I get criticized or I don't agree with my business partner on this? We're here to help. There's a lot of organizations out there that are willing to help, and we just want you to be able to start somewhere. So feel free to reach out to my office, and we're here to get you started.
Thank you. And Tom, I think your last big idea.
So I wanted to let people have two takeaways for people. One is you can't measure, every business owner knows this, you can't manage what you don't measure. So there are tools out there to start measuring. And so here are two tools. The Focus on Energy actually has something right on their website for different types of businesses. And so you can go in there if you're a warehouse business, if you're a restaurant or bar, or if you're manufacturing, you can check that out on opportunities. They'll walk you through a survey that will help you get started. And then Energy Star nationally has a portfolio manager program, which more looks at building consumption, building energy use. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is just participation in the decisions that are being made about how rates are set, how the policies of our utilities, this whole issue of can I rent my panels versus owning panels. There's a public comment process through the Public Service Commission, and we urge our small business members and small businesses across the state to participate.
Awesome, thank you, Tom. And over to Becky for one last takeaway.
Yeah, all these things are doable in steps, and you don't need to solve every single thing today. Doing that, anything is better than nothing. Taking the first small step, no matter how small it is, and then taking the next step. And then utilizing the people around you, whether that's your employees, other business owners, the government programs that are available, and other experts.
in this, anybody can be an expert, and all that information is available. So utilizing people to find those solutions for you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I really want to take just a second to thank you, Becky, Tom, Maria. Thank you guys for imparting your knowledge on this. I really appreciate the Citizens Utility Board for, giving us the opportunity to come together and just share some stories, share some resources. This is a very important conversation to have, obviously. And I would encourage everybody, please keep up with the Citizens Utility Board with CUB as they keep moving through some of these webinars. There's another one next week on the 13th and October 20th. You can see them there on your screen. Register up for them. These are great conversations to have. So with that, I appreciate everybody's time and thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.